Hey guys, Char5 here, and today we are going to move on with Coraline. How long ago did this movie come out? I don't quite remember, but I remember seeing a lot of trailers for Coraline, and I remember really wanting to watch the film because by that time I'd actually really gotten into animation, and I appreciated it a lot more. So when I saw the trailers for Coraline, I really wanted to watch it, but I never got around to doing it until like a year ago or something. Pretty much by the time I got like Netflix and my sister saw that Coraline was on Netflix, she figured, hey, why don't you watch it? And she put it on for me one day while I was working, and I just got so distracted by it because it was a really interesting movie. At first, it starts off a little slow, I think. Like the intensity of the movie and what you expect it to be like it's kind of slow at first, and it's a little bit harder to pay attention during that opening sequence. But later on, when the freaky things start happening, because even then most of it seems very innocent, you know. Like even though you kind of know that it's a movie that is a little intense for kids, because I will say, like, despite its very kid-friendly aesthetic, it is a pretty intense film for kids, I gotta say, and I think that's what I liked so much about it. Because it starts off pretty normally, like, oh, this is a girl and this is her life, and you know, she doesn't like where her life is right now because her parents are always too busy or something. And I feel like that's maybe something that some kids can relate to, and it all seems like pretty standard fare, very innocent, like I said. Her getting along with her neighbors and stuff like that. And then the weird stuff starts happening when she finds the door to the other world, and it almost like like the turn of a dime, things start getting like super intense to the point where it's like incredibly creepy. Like I found it creepy as an adult watching it my first time. I can't imagine how kids must have felt watching it their first time. It must have been near scarring for them. That being said, I do very much like the visuals. The story is very interesting. The animation is great. Like I said during the last video, this was a movie, I believe it was directed by the same person who directed Nightmare Before Christmas, and actually has no involvement with Tim Burton whatsoever. But I think the thing is, and I think this is a pretty big thing, at least nowadays, most stop motion, I think like a lot of people think that stop motion is just directed by Tim Burton now. More specifically, because for some reason, I don't know, I never really thought about it until right now, but I guess a lot of stop motion ends up being pretty creepy nowadays. Like back in the day, it was just an animation form. Like it was often associated, I guess, with like holidays, especially like Christmas with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and a lot of those other Christmas specials at the time that use a lot of stop motion. And nowadays, it's like most stop motion that isn't Lego is used for creepier stuff, and I think that has to do with the way the characters move. It's kind of a very unnatural look because it's not really all too smooth, even though in some cases it is, because I know that there are a lot of smooth movements in Coraline and in Nightmare as well. But I guess there's something just off-putting about it that I think that's why they immediately choose to go with more creepy vibes as opposed to anything else. And because, you know, James and the Giant Peach and Nightmare, you know, had Tim Burton's involvement, you know, one of them I think James and the Giant Peach, like I said, was directed by Tim Burton, and Tim Burton wrote A Nightmare. Well, he wrote the poem behind it. I think that's why people, you know, relate so many of these stop-motion animations, especially because they're creepy, to Tim Burton. They have that gothic feel to them. I was actually reading a list before I started Cutesy Month, listing 5 movies that you might have thought that Tim Burton directed, but he didn't. And it's true. Like I guess a lot of us were under the impression that he had something to do with these films, and in most cases he didn't have anything to do with them at all. Like and in other cases it was just him in another role. Like he wasn't directing, he was just, you know, he was a producer, or he did in like I said, Nightmare's case, he was just the writer of the original poem. Like I remember I think the movie's just called 9. That was a movie that I saw way back when it like first got released. And I don't remember all too much from it, but I do remember that it was like set in a dystopian future or something. And it definitely does give off that Burton vibe, but he legit had nothing to do with that movie. And, you know, I remember thinking to myself, like, this must have been made by the same guy that made Nightmare, and I don't think it was even directed by the same person either. I don't think, at least. It might have been. But anyway, if you've never seen Coraline, if you're watching this video, you probably have, but if you haven't seen it, I would recommend watching it, but it is one of those, like, I guess, disclaimers where I do have to say, like, oh, get prepared for some pretty weird stuff. It's not overly weird to the point where it's completely 100% off-putting, but it is kind of like, what is happening? This is, like, kind of creepy, even for older audiences. So, in the piece, I guess, to talk about it a little bit, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with her, because even though I've drawn Jack and Sally by this point, this was still like a new thing for me. You know, like drawing cartoons that are not even closely related to my style was so new to me, and it was really intimidating. And I really didn't know what to do with Coraline, so I decided, you know what? Well, I won't just draw her, but I'll draw like someone from the other world. And I figured, well, who better to draw than Coraline herself? I could have drawn the main antagonist, and if you haven't seen the movie, I won't really reveal what's going on with that. But I figured, you know what? I'll draw, you know, Otherworld Coraline, and, you know, see how that goes. And honestly, I think I loved drawing Otherworld Coraline more than actual Coraline, because there was something about drawing Coraline that made... I think I didn't get her face right. I didn't get her head right. There was something about her expression or something that I did that I just didn't like the way it looked. But for some reason, when I drew Otherworld Coraline, not to, you know, speak great of myself or anything, but I think I did nail the way she looks, you know, like down to her expression, her eyebrows, the teeth. I think the mouths in the movie were one of the more signature things about the way the characters looked. I don't think that there's been a movie that looks the way Coraline looks. Like, animation-wise, sure, they're like any stop-motion movie looks that way, but, you know, just the design of the characters, I think, is... They have those, like, really skinny, very, like, long proportions, and I love stuff like that. I absolutely love designs that are just so far away from human proportions as possible. Like, in some cases, it's huge chest with very slender, you know, waists, like just incredibly impossible for a human to have those kind of proportions. But they work, and I love it. And Coraline is definitely that, because she has a huge head, a tiny neck, like the most slender body I think I've ever seen on a cartoon character, and like her limbs are just, like, I think her limbs are just a little smaller than her body is. And it's like, to me, that design is just really fun. And her like, the cool thing about it is she doesn't just have the one design. She doesn't just have like the raincoat or the design that I'm drawing her in right now. Like, she has various different things. And I thought about drawing both of them in different outfits, but I figured, you know what, this actually just might be easier for the sake of, you know, what I'm doing. They're not really doing anything all too interesting. I just figured, you know, I'll draw them, you know, together, one in the back, one in the front. Or rather, one in the background, one in the foreground. I wish I could have done something a bit more dynamic with the piece, something that was more interesting to look at, instead of just posing two characters in different planes of the image. But really, I just didn't know at all what it was I wanted to do. I didn't really know I didn't know what scene I wanted to set with this, is basically what I'm trying to say. Something else you'll notice that I'm doing that I didn't do in the other pieces, the other two cutesy ones, at least. Well, in no piece, but more specifically those two. I'm actually outlining the piece, and I wanted to do that because I thought that it would give it a way better look. I think it would make it pop out a lot more. And for some reason, I just absolutely ended up loving the way it looked. Like, I was still trying to shade a bit realistically, and by what I mean when I say realistically is like in the context of what it looks like in the movie. Like, I try to give it the proper shading that they would have in the film, but at the same time, like, I realized, like, okay, well, these are still cartoons, though. So why don't I just outline it and see how it looks that way? And for some reason, to me, I just loved it. I loved how much, you know, a simple outline, just making the outlines thicker, makes it pop. And I don't know, to me, it just looked really good, and I hope you like it too. This is the final piece. I had a lot of fun drawing it. I love the way Otherworld Coraline looks. Real Coraline, I love the texture she has. Her face could have been more interesting. She could have been doing something more like with her hands or with her body, I don't know. But all in all, I'm not too disappointed with this piece. I do like it. Again, I just wish I could have done something more with it. If you haven't seen Coraline, go check it out, because I feel like it's a movie that not too many people have seen. But it is, I think that if it had gotten more attention, it definitely would have been a classic. And I still, in some ways, consider it a children's horror movie classic. Definitely something you should check out for the Halloween season. Especially if you have like little kids that you want to maybe freak out. But until next time, guys, I will see you with something else that is Tim Burton, and is very related to stuff we've already done. But until next time, guys, stay safe and stay awesome. This is Chara5, signing off.